The rain tapped against the window as Karina arranged the dinner table for two. A delicate aroma of rosemary and garlic wafted through the small dining room, mingling with the soft flicker of candlelight. Tonight was special. 6 years since she and Jake had secretly said their vows, promising to love each other despite the world's obstacles. She glanced at the clock, 9:15 p.m. Jake was supposed to be home an hour ago. Her fingers brushed the smooth surface of her phone, debating whether to call him again. But the last time she'd called, he'd brushed her off with a curt, "Busy at work, Karina. Don't wait up." She sighed, sitting down in her seat. The roast chicken she'd carefully prepared was now cold, the wine untouched. Her reflection shimmered in the darkened window. A woman in her late 20s, her simple navy dress elegant but understated, her hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. She looked like any other secretary waiting for her boss, and that stung, because that's all she was to the world. Jake's secretary. The choice had been mutual. Jake's family, owners of a massive business empire, had never approved of her. To keep their love safe, they decided to keep their marriage hidden until Jake secured control of the company. It made sense at the time, but lately Jake's affection had cooled. His once warm smiles had become distant glances, his thoughtful gestures replaced by indifference. Her stomach churned as the news channel played softly in the background. A familiar face appeared on the screen, and Karina's attention snapped to it. There was Jake, his sharp suit immaculate, his easy smile dazzling the reporters around him. But what he said next drained all the colour from her face. "I'm happy to announce my engagement to Lily Davenport," Jake declared, standing beside a stunning blonde woman in a sparkling gown. The cameras captured their smiles, the way Jake's hand rested lightly on Lily's back. "It's been a long time coming, and I couldn't be happier." The reporter's voice droned on about the merger between their families and the business implications, but Karina couldn't hear it over the roaring in her ears. Her vision blurred as she stumbled toward the TV, her knees threatening to give way. Her Jake, her husband, was announcing his engagement to someone else. Her trembling fingers turned the TV off, plunging the room into silence. The smell of the uneaten dinner turned her stomach. Karina stood frozen in the center of the room, her mind racing with questions she was too scared to answer. Had he ever loved her? Had she been a fool all this time, believing in a love that only she had felt? Her hand clenched the edge of the table as a new steely resolve hardened within her. She wouldn't cry, not tonight. But one thing was clear, she couldn't stay here anymore. Karina sat on the sofa, the clock ticking in the otherwise silent apartment. The candles on the dining table had burned down to their stubs, and the once beautiful dinner sat untouched, its aroma long faded. She had cleaned the dishes to keep her hands busy, but now there was nothing left to distract her. All that remained was an oppressive stillness and the lingering ache in her chest. It was nearing midnight when the sound of the front door opening shattered the silence. Jake stepped in, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim hallway light. He didn't even glance at the carefully set table or the half-melted candles. His face was unreadable, his tie slightly loosened, and his phone clutched in his hand. "You're late," Karina said softly, standing up. Her voice trembled despite her best effort to sound calm. Jake stopped mid-step, his expression hardening. "I told you not to wait up," he said, his tone curt and devoid of warmth. He set his phone on the counter and started unbuttoning his cuff as though her presence didn't matter. "Jake," she said, stepping closer, her voice cracking. "I saw the news. The engagement, Lily. What's going on? What does this mean?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't meet her eyes. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a crisp white envelope. He handed it to her without a word. Karina stared at the envelope in disbelief. Her hands trembled as she opened it, pulling out a thick stack of papers. It didn't take long to understand. Bold black letters at the top read, "Divorce agreement." Her breath caught in her throat. "You're divorcing me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake finally met her gaze, his eyes cold and detached. "I need you to sign them within a week," he said. "It's better this way." Karina's chest tightened, as if someone had wrapped iron bands around her ribcage. "Better," she repeated, her voice rising. "For who, Jake? For you? For Lily? Was any of it real? Did you ever love me?" He flinched at her words, but his expression didn't soften. "It's done, Karina. Just sign them." Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not when he stood there, like a stranger. The man she'd loved for 6 years, now a shadow of himself. She clutched the papers to her chest, her knuckles white. "Fine," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "If this is what you want, I'll sign them. But don't expect me to stay a moment longer than I have to." Jake didn't respond. He simply turned and walked into the bedroom, leaving Karina standing alone in the living room, clutching the divorce papers like they might burn her. When the door clicked shut behind him, Karina sank onto the sofa, her legs too weak to hold her. The tears she'd held back streamed down her face, silent and relentless. She pressed her hands against her mouth to stifle the sobs, unwilling to give Jake the satisfaction of hearing her break. In the stillness of the night, Karina made a decision. She would leave without a fight, but before she went, she would fulfill her duties as his secretary one last time. It would be her final gift to the man who had broken her heart, and when she left, she wouldn't look back. The air in Jake's office was thick with tension as Karina sat behind her desk, typing away at her final report. It had been 6 days since Jake had handed her the divorce papers, 6 days since she'd made the decision to leave without a word, yet each passing moment was a battle to maintain her composure. The elevator chimed and Lily Davenport's unmistakable laughter echoed down the hallway. Karina's fingers froze on the keyboard as Lily strutted in, her designer heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. "Well, if it isn't the ever-loyal secretary," Lily said, her tone dripping with mockery. She leaned casually against Karina's desk, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "I hope you finished arranging Jake's schedule. After all, he's got a future to plan. With me." Karina didn't look up, refusing to take the bait. "Everything you need is in the folder," she said quietly, nodding toward the pristine files neatly organized on her desk. "Oh, how efficient," Lily sneered, picking up the folder and flipping through it lazily. "It's a wonder you lasted this long. You must have been really desperate for the job, but I suppose every kingdom needs its servants." Karina clenched her jaw but remained silent. She knew better than to let Lily see her pain. "Anyway," Lily continued, tossing the folder back on the desk, "don't let the door hit you on the way out. I'll make sure Jake never has to deal with inconveniences like you again." With a final smirk, Lily sauntered into Jake's office, leaving Karina to sit alone in the quiet humiliation of her words. Karina inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She wouldn't let this woman's cruelty shake her resolve. The rest of the week passed in a blur. Jake's indifference was sharper than any words Lily could throw at her. He barely acknowledged Karina's presence, treating her like any other employee. Each cold interaction was another nail in the coffin of her love for him. On the 7th day, her last day, Karina arrived early, her heart heavy but determined. She placed the signed divorce papers in an envelope, sealing them with a deliberate press. Alongside them, she left a letter, not to beg or explain, but to say goodbye. "Jake, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I won't burden you with words about love or betrayal. I only hope you find what you're looking for, even if it was never me. Attached to files that should help with the expansion project. Consider them my last act as your secretary. Goodbye, Karina." She slipped the letter and the papers into a neat stack on his desk. Then she glanced around the office that had been her world for years. Memories flickered in her mind. Late nights spent helping Jake, quiet laughter over shared cups of coffee, the brief moments when he'd been hers entirely. Karina walked out of the building for the last time, her footsteps steady and unyielding. She didn't look back. As the cool night air wrapped around her, she pulled her coat tighter and let a single tear fall. She had given Jake her all, but now it was time to reclaim herself. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew one thing. This was the end of her life as Jake's shadow. A new chapter awaited, one she would write on her own terms. The train station buzzed with activity, a sea of commuters hurrying past Karina as she stood still, clutching her small suitcase. Her reflection in the glass doors of the departing train looked unfamiliar, her once bright eyes now dull, her posture slouched as if carrying an invisible weight. The train's whistle sounded, jolting her back to the present. Karina boarded without hesitation, finding an empty seat near the window. She placed her suitcase on the rack above and sank into the seat, resting her head against the cool glass. The cityscape blurred into streaks of light and shadow as the train pulled away. As the rhythm of the train soothed her frayed nerves, memories surfaced unbidden. 3 years ago, she had left behind a life of unimaginable luxury. She could still see the sprawling mansion where she grew up, the perfectly manicured gardens, and the fleet of cars parked in the circular driveway. Her family, the Eldridges, was one of the wealthiest in the country, but none of that mattered to her, not compared to Jake. She had met him at a charity gala hosted by her family. He was handsome, ambitious, and so utterly unlike the polished suitors her parents had paraded before her. For the first time in her life, she felt seen, not as an heiress, but as a person. But her family had disapproved of Jake from the start. He wasn't one of them, they'd said. Karina, defiant and in love, had walked away from it all, choosing a modest life with Jake over the gilded cage of her upbringing. Her lips curved into a bitter smile. "Love," she murmured to herself, the word tasting sour now. Love had brought her here, alone on a train with no home to return to and no future to cling to. Karina's hand instinctively moved to her stomach, resting there protectively. She had discovered the pregnancy just days before Jake handed her the divorce papers. She hadn't told him. What was the point? He was already gone, his heart elsewhere. The announcement had filled her with conflicting emotions: fear, grief, and Surprisingly, a sliver of hope. This child would be her anchor, the reason to move forward even if she had to do it alone. As the train sped toward her destination, Karina closed her eyes and let herself drift, her mind heavy with thoughts of the past and the uncertain road ahead. Jake sat alone in his office late into the night. The city skyline glittered through the expansive windows behind him, but he barely noticed. The stack of papers Karina had left sat on his desk, staring back at him like an accusation. His fingers traced the edge of the envelope, his jaw tightening as memories of Karina flooded his mind. Her laughter, the way her nose crinkled when she was annoyed, the quiet strength she exuded even in her darkest moments. He remembered it all, and he had destroyed it. He pushed back his chair, rising abruptly. Pacing across the room, he ran a hand through his hair, his frustration bubbling over. Why had it come to this? Why had he allowed it? The answer was simple. He hadn't had a choice. Or so he told himself. His parents had made their stance clear years ago. They had tolerated Karina as his secretary, a quiet presence in his life, but when whispers of their secret marriage had reached them, the true depth of their cruelty had emerged. His father had delivered the threat with chilling calm. "End it with her, Jake," he'd said, sitting behind his desk like a king on a throne. "Or I will." Jake had known better than to question what his father meant. The Eldridge family was powerful, but his father's reach was longer. His mother's cold, clipped tone had sealed the ultimatum. Lily is a perfect match. She understands our world. Karina is nothing but a liability. He had tried to fight them, pleaded with them to leave Karina alone, but every argument was met with steely resolve. "She will disappear, Jake," his father had said, his voice deadly quiet. "Do you want that?" And so, Jake had made his decision. He had chosen to push Karina away, to protect her the only way he knew how. It was a choice that had torn him apart every day since. The sound of his phone vibrating broke the silence. He glanced at the screen, Lily. He ignored the call, letting it buzz incessantly before stopping. The sight of her name made his stomach churn. She had been his parents' perfect pawn, an unrelenting force in his life. Jake returned to his desk, his eyes falling on the letter Karina had left. He unfolded it slowly, his hands trembling. Her words were simple, devoid of bitterness, but they cut him deeper than anything his parents or Lily ever could. "By the time you read this, I'll be gone. I won't burden you with words about love or betrayal. I only hope you find what you're looking for, even if it was never me." He closed his eyes. He hadn't just failed Karina as a husband. He had betrayed her trust in the most unforgivable way. But what could he do now? If he reached out, if he tried to bring her back, he would be putting her in danger. His parents wouldn't hesitate to act if they felt threatened. The papers sat before him, signed and final. He would never stop loving Karina, and he would never forgive himself for losing her. He stared out at the city below, his reflection in the glass a shadow of the man he used to be. The morning sun bathed the sprawling Eldridge estate in a warm, golden glow. The grand halls, once filled with memories of her childhood, now bore the signs of a thriving businesswoman's influence. Karina walked through them with a quiet confidence, her tailored suit accentuating her poised demeanor. In her home office, sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a desk cluttered with contracts and blueprints. Karina reviewed a stack of proposals, her pen darting across the pages with practiced precision. "Mommy!" A young boy's voice rang out, shattering the quiet focus of her work. Karina turned, her face softening as her 3-year-old son bounded into the room. His dark hair was a mess of unruly waves, and his bright green eyes sparkled with joy, eyes that mirrored Jake's so closely, it still took her breath away. "Yes, sweetheart?" Karina asked, crouching to catch him as he ran into her arms. "Grandpa said I can ride the pony today," he exclaimed, his small hands clutching hers excitedly. Karina ruffling his hair. "Did he now? Well, let's make sure you're ready then." The boy grinned before running back toward the door, calling for his grandfather. Karina watched him go, her heart swelling with a mix of love and bittersweet memories. Her son was the anchor that had pulled her through the darkest days. She had named him Leo, a nod to strength and courage, qualities she hoped he would carry. Her father appeared moments later, carrying a small riding helmet. "You're spoiling him," Karina teased as he helped Leo put it on. Her father smiled, a glint of pride in his eyes. "That's my job as a grandfather." He turned to Karina, his expression softening. "You've done well. Karina. Better than I ever imagined. Karina's gaze dropped briefly to the ring on her finger. It was simple, unassuming, and deliberately ambiguous. People speculated about her relationship status, but Karina never confirmed or denied anything. The truth was more complex than anyone knew. Her life now was a stark contrast to the one she'd left behind. As the head of her family's new venture into sustainable industries, she had built a name for herself beyond the shadow of her parents' wealth. Yet, despite her success, a part of her heart remained unresolved, a quiet ache she had buried deep but couldn't completely silence. Karina glanced out the window, watching Leo and her father in the garden. The boys' laughter filled the air, a bright counterpoint to her introspective mood. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them. After all, she had already survived the worst. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her back to the present. Karina's eyes narrowed slightly. It was more than just another event. It was an opportunity to show the world what she had become, and perhaps an opportunity to confront the ghosts of her past. She set the phone down and turned back to the window, watching her son's carefree play. The future was hers to shape, and she wasn't going to let anything, or anyone, hold her back. The grand ballroom of the Eldridge estate was a masterpiece of opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceilings, casting warm light on the polished marble floors and the elegantly dressed guests milling about. Soft classical music played in the background, the lilting melody weaving through the hum of conversations and clinking glasses. Jake entered the room, his sharp suit fitting him like a second skin. He exuded confidence, but inside, he was anything but. He had dreaded this night, knowing it meant coming face to face with the past he had tried and failed to leave behind. He spotted her almost immediately. Karina stood near a grand staircase, her presence commanding, yet effortlessly graceful. She wore a deep emerald gown that shimmered under the chandeliers, the color accentuating her glowing skin and the poise she had always carried so naturally. But there was something new about her, an air of authority, a self-assuredness he hadn't seen before. Jake's breath caught as his eyes drifted to the small boy standing beside her. The child was laughing, his dark hair tousled and his green eyes, Jake's green eyes, dancing with mischief. The sight knocked the air out of him. "Karina," he whispered under his breath, frozen in place. He couldn't tear his gaze away. The boy was a mirror of himself at that age. There was no denying it. He was Jake's son. As if sensing his presence, Karina's gaze shifted, her eyes locked with Jake's, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. Her expression was unreadable, her polished smile never faltering. She placed a protective hand on her son's shoulder and turned back to the man she had been speaking with. Jake's jaw tightened as he recognized him. Evan Harrington, tall, charming, and infuriatingly familiar. Evan leaned closer to Karina, whispering something that made her laugh softly. The sound was like a dagger to Jake's chest. He crossed the room in long strides, his focus narrowing on Karina. The noise of the ballroom faded into the background as his jealousy and frustration flared. "Karina," Jake said, his voice cutting through the polite conversations around them. She turned, her expression carefully composed. "Mr. Harrington," she said smoothly, addressing Evan first. "This is Jake Harrington, CEO of Global Enterprises." Evan extended a hand toward Jake, his smile easy and nonchalant. "Casual. Pleasure to meet you. I'm Evan, Karina's fiancé." Jake ignored the hand, his eyes locked on Karina. Coldly, "Fiancé," he repeated, his voice colder than he intended. Karina raised an eyebrow, her expression calm. Calmly, "Yes, Evan and I are engaged." Her hand rested lightly on Evan's arm, a gesture that felt deliberate, pointed. "What brings you here, Jake?" Her question was polite, but the sharp edge beneath her words was unmistakable. Jake struggled to form a response, his mind spinning as he tried to process the scene before him. And yet, his eyes drifted back to the boy, who was now watching him curiously. The boy's resemblance to Jake was undeniable, and the realization hit him like a tidal wave. This was his son, his blood, his legacy, and he had never known. Jake swallowed hard, his carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. He hadn't just lost Karina, He had lost far more than he could have ever imagined. The tension between Jake and Karina was palpable as they moved into a quieter section of the ballroom. The warm glow of the chandeliers barely softened the icy atmosphere between them. Jake's jaw was tight, his eyes locked on Karina as he struggled to keep his voice calm. "Karina," he began, his voice low but firm. "We need to talk." She turned to face him, her expression calm but her eyes flashing with anger. "Do we?" she replied coolly. "Because the last time we had anything to discuss, you handed me divorce papers." Jake flinched at her words, but he pressed on. "Who is he?" His gaze darted to the boy, who was now playing near the staircase, with Evan keeping a watchful eye. "The boy. He's my son, isn't he?" Karina's face hardened. "That's none of your concern. None of my concern." Jake's voice rose slightly, his frustration boiling over. "I have a right to know, Karina. You should have told me." "Told you what?" Karina interrupted, her tone sharp. "That I was pregnant when you tossed me aside like I meant nothing. That your parents' approval mattered more than our marriage. Or maybe that you had already planned your engagement to Lily, while I was still signing the divorce papers." Her voice trembled, but she didn't falter. The raw emotion in her words cut through Jake's defenses, leaving him momentarily speechless. "I did what I had to do to protect you," he said finally, his voice desperate. "You think I wanted this? My parents—" "Don't you dare blame them," Karina snapped, stepping closer. "You could have fought for me, Jake, for us, but you didn't. You made your choice and I made mine." Her words hit him like a slap. Jake's fists clenched at his sides as he tried to explain himself. "You don't understand." "No, Jake," Karina interrupted again, her voice quieter but no less fierce. "You don't understand. You don't get to walk back into my life and demand answers. You gave up that right the moment you chose them over me." The room had grown quieter as their heated exchange drew the attention of nearby guests. Whispers rippled through the crowd, eyes glancing curiously in their direction. Karina noticed but didn't care. She was done hiding her emotions. She straightened her shoulders and took a step back. "This conversation is over," she said, her tone final. "Whatever you're looking for, you won't find it here." Jake reached out as if to stop her, but she turned and walked away, her gown sweeping elegantly behind her. Her son, Leo, ran to her with a delighted laugh, oblivious to the tension that had just unfolded. Evan joined them, his presence a steady comfort as he gently guided them toward the exit. Jake stood frozen, watching her leave. The weight of her words settled heavily on him, the realization of what he had lost hitting him anew. Around him, the buzz of the party resumed, but for Jake, the world had never felt quieter. The night after the gala was restless for Jake. The weight of unanswered questions gnawed at him, and Karina's words echoed in his mind. "You gave up that right the moment you chose them over me." He couldn't let it go. The boy's eyes, the same piercing green that stared back at him in the mirror, haunted him. Deep down, Jake already knew the truth, but he needed confirmation. He couldn't leave it unanswered any longer. The next morning, Jake's resolve hardened. He had his assistant discreetly gather information about Karina's life since their divorce. What he discovered only deepened his turmoil. Karina had returned to her family's fold, reclaiming the Eldridge name and launching a successful, sustainable business venture. But there was no mention of the child's paternity. Frustrated, Jake decided to take matters into his own hands. His jealousy and desperation led him to confront Evan directly. He found Evan at a trendy cafe in the city, casually sipping coffee while reading through documents. The sight of Evan's relaxed demeanor only fueled Jake's anger. "Evan," Jake said curtly, striding up to the table. Evan looked up, his expression calm but slightly amused. "Jake, to what do I owe this pleasure?" Jake didn't bother with pleasantries. "We need to talk. About Karina." And the boy, Evan's expression hardened slightly as he placed his coffee cup down. "I don't think that's any of your business, Jake." "It is my business," Jake snapped, leaning forward. "Leo is my son, isn't he?" Evan raised an eyebrow, his calm demeanor unshaken. "And if he is, what does it change, Jake? Karina doesn't owe you anything, not after what you did to her." Jake's fists clenched at the accusation. "I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice," Evan interrupted sharply, standing to meet Jake's glare. "And you made yours. Karina rebuilt her life without you. Do you think you can just waltz back in and fix everything?" The cafe fell quiet as their heated exchange caught the attention of other patrons. Jake's voice lowered, but his intensity didn't waver. "I deserve to know. I deserve to know if he's my son." Evan stared at him for a long moment, the tension between them thick. Finally, he, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, Jake. Leo is your son." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He staggered back slightly, his mind reeling. Why didn't she tell me? Evan's voice softened, though it carried a sharp edge. Because you made it clear she couldn't trust you. You broke her, Jake. She spent the last 3 years piecing herself back together for Leo's sake. She doesn't need you to come and tear it all apart again. Jake sank into the chair across from Evan, his head in his hands. The truth was out, but it only deepened his guilt. He had a son he hadn't known about. A son he had abandoned without even realizing it. Evan leaned forward, his tone more measured now. If you want to do something for Karina and Leo, then think carefully before you act. You've done enough damage already. Jake didn't respond. His mind was a whirlwind of regret, anger, and sorrow. For the first time, he fully grasped the magnitude of what he had lost and the uphill battle it would take to make amends. Lily entered Jake's office unannounced, her high heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Jake barely glanced up from his desk, his thoughts consumed by the revelations about Karina and Leo. "Jake," Lily began, her tone dripping with practiced sweetness. "We need to talk." Jake leaned back in his chair, his expression impassive. "Make it quick, Lily, I'm busy." She approached his desk, placing her manicured hands on the edge as she leaned forward. "I heard some interesting things about that gala the other night," she said, her voice carefully casual. Jake's eyes narrowed. "What do you want, Lily?" Her smile tightened, the facade of charm slipping slightly. "You've been distracted, Jake. People are starting to notice, and now there's talk of her. That secretary of yours, Karina, wasn't it?" Jake's jaw clenched at the mention of Karina. "Be very careful about what you say next, Lily." Lily's confidence faltered for a moment, but she pressed on. "I'm only trying to help. She's a liability, Jake, always was. And now there's a child involved. You can't afford to let this derail everything you've worked for." Jake's patience snapped. He stood abruptly, the intensity in his eyes silencing Lily mid-sentence. "What do you know about her, about Leo?" Lily's composure wavered as she stepped back. "Only what I've heard," she said quickly, her tone defensive. Jake's gaze bore into her, his instincts telling him there was more to her story. "Lily," he said coldly, "if you know something, now is the time to tell me." For a brief moment, Lily hesitated, her mask of confidence slipping entirely. Then, as if sensing the inevitability of the truth coming out, she sighed dramatically. "Fine, I may have taken steps to ensure she stayed out of your life." Jake's expression darkened. "What steps?" Lily crossed her arms, feigning nonchalance. "I made a few calls, sent a few emails. It wasn't hard to discredit her. People like Karina are easy to deal with when you have the right connections." Jake's anger erupted. "You sabotaged her," he demanded, his voice rising. "You went behind my back and destroyed her life while she..." Lily stepped back, her tone defensive. "I was protecting you, Jake. Protecting us. She didn't belong in your world." Jake's fists clenched at his sides, his voice low and deadly. "You had no right to interfere in my life, in her life. You don't know what you've done. I was doing you a favor," Lily insisted, her voice shrill. "You would have thrown everything away for her, your family, the company. I couldn't let that happen." Jake's glare was icy. "I would have thrown it all away for her in a heartbeat if it meant keeping her safe from people like you." Lily froze, stunned into silence. Jake stepped closer, his voice calm but cutting. "We're done, Lily. Whatever arrangement we had, whatever plans my parents forced on me, it's over. You're out of my life, starting now." Her face contorted with anger. "You'll regret this, Jake," she spat. "I already regret trusting you," Jake replied coldly. He stepped around her and opened the office door. "Leave, and don't come back." Lily hesitated for a moment before storming out, her heels echoing down the hallway. Jake closed the door behind her, leaning against it as the weight of the confrontation settled over him. He had made a mess of his life, but this was one step toward setting things right. He only hoped it wasn't too late to fix what truly mattered. Jake stood in the opulent study of his family's mansion, the room exuding the cold, calculated power that had defined his parents for decades. His father sat behind an imposing mahogany desk, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp. His mother perched on the edge of a leather armchair, her gaze icy as she observed Jake with faint disapproval. "You've made quite a mess of things," his father began, his voice calm but laced with menace. "Cutting ties with Lily? What were you thinking?" Jake's jaw tightened, but he didn't hesitate. "I'm done letting you control my life. Lily's gone, and she's staying gone." His mother's lips thinned into a displeased line. "Jake," You've always had a tendency to be impulsive. We guided you for a reason. Everything we've done was to secure your future." Jake took a step forward, his green eyes blazing with defiance. "No, everything you've done was to control me, but that ends now." His father leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "And what exactly do you plan to do, Jake? Throw away everything we've built for some insignificant woman?" Jake's fists clenched at his sides. "That insignificant woman is the mother of my son, and she's worth more than anything you've ever built." For the first time, his father's composure cracked, his eyes narrowing in anger. "You've lost your mind. Do you have any idea what you're risking by pursuing this foolish sentiment?" "I know exactly what I'm risking," Jake said firmly, "but it's nothing compared to what I've already lost because of you." The room fell silent, the weight of Jake's words hanging heavily in the air. His mother finally spoke, her voice clipped. "So what now? Do you intend to walk away from the family, from the company?" Jake exhaled sharply, his voice steady. "I'll stay with the company, for Leo's sake, but I'll do it on my terms. No more arranged marriages, no more backdoor deals, and no more threats to Karina." His father's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the desk. "You're making a grave mistake." "No," Jake replied, his voice unwavering. "I'm finally doing the right thing." Without another word, Jake turned and walked out of the study, his shoulders squared with determination. Back in his own office late that day, Jake began quietly working to support Karina's business. He had his assistant allocate resources to her projects anonymously, ensuring her company could expand without interference. Every step felt like a small piece of redemption, a way to rebuild what he had destroyed. One evening, as Jake sat in his office reviewing a report on Karina's latest successes, a faint smile tugged at his lip. He knew it would take more than financial support to earn her forgiveness, but it was a start. And Jake had no intention of giving up until he made things right. The Eldridge estate stood as a beacon of everything Jake had once feared and envied. Karina's world, one he had forced her back into through his own weakness. Now, he stood at its gates, his heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and hope. Taking a deep breath, Jake stepped through the entrance. The sprawling gardens were alive with the sound of birdsong and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. He spotted Karina sitting on a stone bench under a large oak tree, her son playing in the grass nearby. As he approached, Leo noticed him first. The boy paused, tilting his head curiously before running toward his mother. "Mummy, there's someone here," he called, his voice high and cheerful. Karina looked up, her serene expression tightening as she recognized Jake. She stood slowly, her hand resting lightly on Leo's shoulder. "What are you doing here, Jake?" she asked, her tone guarded. Jake stopped a respectful distance away, his posture calm but his eyes pleading. "I came to apologize," he said softly, "for everything, and to meet my son." Karina's breath caught at his words, but she quickly regained her composure. "Leo, sweetheart, why don't you go play for a little while? I need to talk to Mr. Harrington." Leo hesitated, glancing between his mother and Jake before nodding and running back to his toys. Jake watched him for a moment, his heart clenching at the sight. He looked back at Karina. "He's incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "just like his mother." Karina crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here after all this time." "I know," Jake admitted, "and I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I need you to know how sorry I am for not fighting for you, for walking away when you needed me the most." He paused, his voice breaking slightly, "for missing the first 3 years of my son's life." Karina's eyes softened, but she didn't let her guard down. "Why now, Jake? Why come back?" Jake took a step closer, his tone earnest. "Because I can't live another day knowing I abandoned the 2 people who mean the most to me. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to take responsibility. I want to be part of Leo's life, and if you'll let me, I want to try to fix what I broke between us." Karina looked away, her gaze drifting to Leo, who was building a small tower with his toys. When she turned back to Jake, her eyes held a mix of sadness and hope. "It's not that simple, Jake. You can't just waltz back in and expect everything to be okay." "I don't expect that," Jake said quickly. "I'm willing to work for it, for as long as it takes." The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, Karina sighed. "Leo deserves to know his father," she said quietly. "But this doesn't mean I'm ready to trust you again. That will take time." Jake nodded, Karina glanced at Leo again, a small smile tugging at her lips as she watched him play. "We'll see, Jake, we'll see." Later that evening, Jake sat with Leo under the oak tree, the boy chattering happily as he showed Jake his favourite toys. Karina watched from a distance, her heart conflicted. For the first time in years, a faint spark of hope flickered within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, redemption wasn't impossible.